Okay, so Canada has been on the news a lot to start this year. You know, stupid jokes aside of it becoming the 51st state, although more realistically, it would become 13 additional state if you include all the 10 provinces and 13 territories of the nation. Just so we are aware, Canadians, we already know you guys won't be the 51st state. It's just big brother teasing little brother. That's all this is. You know, when you have siblings, you used to tease on one another. That's just sort of what siblings do. It's kind of the same situation with the whole, oh, you're gonna become the 51st state. It's just the bigger brother teasing on the little brother. We're not actually serious about annexing you guys. We can't even do so anyway, since you guys are still part of the Commonwealth. And, you know, we love you guys. You know, we support your sovereignty. You're essentially America's hat. And, you know, most importantly, we're just always there for one another. We're always there for each other. But we're also big-time hockey rivals as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing Austin Matthews, Jack Eichel, and the Tkachuk brothers kick your asses in the Four Nations face-off coming up. But, you know, at the end of the day, just like with Brazil and Argentina, they like to tease one another. They're rivals in their nation's respective sports. And that's basically how the US and Canada view one another. They're both brothers and are very similar culturally. But Canada has been on the news a lot, especially with Trump making his usual jokes about it becoming the 51st state. Again, we are already aware that he won't do it, but we also got another huge story coming out of Canada, and that is that their current prime minister, well, soon to be former prime minister, Justin Trudeau, has officially announced that he's resigning. Now, Canadian politics has always fascinated me. Again, the two nations, the US and Canada, they're neighbors, they share the longest unguarded border in the world, fun fact, and they're also somewhat pretty similar politically as well. Granted, there are some major differences, obviously. For instance, we have a president, they have a prime minister. We have a Congress, they have a parliament. The best way I can describe the Canadian government is kind of sort of like a hybrid of the US government. They have a parliament, they have a House of Commons, they have a prime minister, just like the British. They still recognize the British monarch as its head of state, meaning that King Charles is the King of Canada. So South Park is in fact right about the British monarchy also being the Canadian monarchy. That's actually true. Although head of state is really just more of a symbolic thing rather than just being a de facto official thing. So it has some aspects of the UK government, and it's also just like the United States in a lot of ways. Just like the US, they are divided in subdivisions, like states, due to its size, 10 provinces, each of which has its own premier, which is like Canada's provincial equivalent of a governor here in the United States. They also have a Senate. They have 3 branches of government, kinda, sorta. The Prime Minister is technically the executive branch, although members of Parliament are often appointed in that cabinet position of whatever the Prime Minister chooses. So each minister of the cabinet, which is like a department secretary, is still a member of the House of Commons. And the Senate really doesn't do anything anyway, at least that I know of. And they also have a Supreme Court as well, just like in the United States, a judicial branch. However, in the United States, it's more limited and way more balanced in comparison. We also have 3 branches of government as well, but there are actual checks and balances put in place. The President, Congress, and the Supreme Court all have equal power. We don't have one individual having most of the power or more power than other people and other branches in government. Like in Canada, the Prime Minister has a lot of control being the head of government. They can pick and choose whoever they want to be in their cabinet, for instance, and whatever he says goes. In the US, on the flip side, cabinet members have to be approved by the Senate and go through a confirmation hearing, adding an extra step to the process. Same goes with Supreme Court justices. A prime minister can pick whoever they want to be as a Supreme Court justice, and they don't have to go through any confirmation hearings. When a president picks a Supreme Court justice, they have to be approved by the Senate first, before they become a justice. A president also cannot declare war like a prime minister can. Only Congress can. And a president has to sign off a bill in order for it to be passed as a law officially that was made and created by Congress. It's also up to the Supreme Court to check whether something is unconstitutional here in the United States. If a law or a bill or even an executive order is deemed unconstitutional, Supreme Court steps in, null and void. Canada, I believe, does the same as well. So very similar, but very different. The executive and legislative branches are kinda sort of morphed into one, like a Frankenstein mix in Canada. They don't have the same checks and balances that we do here, but for the most part, they're very similar. And don't even get me started with their language situation, which, if you know, is a complete clusterfuck at times. So that's how the Canadian government works, and its Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is resigning. Like, he has officially announced his resignation. He will be leaving office in, I believe, around March, if I remember correctly. I mean, he's not going to leave his position right away. His party, I believe, has to find a replacement before they can do that and move on. Now, of course, this is a pretty big deal because, you know, a leader of a country is resigning, and it happens to be a major world country. We're talking about Canada. Now, prime ministers in Canada, you know, they come and go. Some resign shortly afterwards if they've done something horribly wrong or they're just really bad all around. A prime ministership in Canada is roughly around 4 years, just as long as a presidential term here in the United States. Sometimes they even have the power to summon another election when it's not an election year. These are usually called snap elections. And usually they're done and they're summoned if the Prime Minister's party wants to gain more seats to get what he wants to be passed done. In the case of Trudeau, he had a minority government when he won his last election in 2019, so he called up a snap election back in 2021, and that turned out to be one of the worst ideas ever, and it blew up in everybody's faces completely. So, you know, prime ministers, they resign, some get voted out, some pass on their leadership onto somebody else in the same party for the next election. You know, they serve their full term up until the election, and the new leader takes over if their party wins. They don't have term limits for prime ministers like what we have here in the United States with our presidents. And to be fair, I think they should. So Trudeau has announced the other day, it is in fact confirmed, Justin Trudeau is resigning as prime minister. And to quote the famous words of Lizzo, it's about damn time! Seriously. Thank the fucking Lord, man. Christ on a stick. Canadians, you should be very happy and rejoicing about this news. Now, why am I, an American, celebrating this and suggesting Canadians to do so as well? Well, for those who are not Canadian or American or do not follow what's going on in Canada, Prime Minister Mr. Popo himself, Justin Trudeau, is the most hated and most unpopular Prime Minister in Canada that at least I have seen in my lifetime. This is an inept individual. I cannot name a single Homo sapien that I know that is from Canada who likes and supports him. You'll be pretty hard-pressed to find somebody in that country that is a Trudeau supporter. Watch what people like Viva Fry have to say about him, or Mutahar especially from Some Ordinary Gamers. He is a pretty harsh critic. He hates him. JJ McCullough made an award-winning video about how fucked up Canadian politics are since Trudeau's resignation, and I can't really blame him. JJ, as of recently, has a moderately severe case of TDS, but even he hates Trudeau. More so than Trump, even. I really just can't think of anybody besides certain partisan milquetoast liberals that like him. He is a shithead. He's mind-bogglingly cringe. Remember the whole people kind stunt that he had to do?
Maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to look into
we
that.
like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because it's more inclusive.
There we go, exactly. Yes, thank you.
We can all learn from each other.
He took a dump on his own father's legacy with his trash policies and proposals. Nationalists, far leftists, Quebecers, and even First Nation Canadians all fucking hate him. Even a chunk of his own liberals don't like him. Trudeau also at times acts authoritarian with regards to some of his policies, One major example of which was during COVID, where he implemented some of the strictest and most hardline lockdowns and mandates anywhere in North America, including a federal mask mandate, mandatory vaccine passports, and a 5-month national curfew where Canadians weren't allowed to go out in public after 10 p.m. local time, all of which had such heavy and major pushback, leading to a trucker convoy on the border between the US and Canada all the way up to Ottawa. Also, do not forget the Bill C-11 Internet Censorship Bill, among other censorship bills that people like J.J. McCullough and Mudahar have spoken firmly against. And one other thing, there was this one time during one of the federal elections happening in Canada where there was a picture of him dressed up as what looks like to be Mr. Popo from Dragon Ball, wearing blackface, looking like the worst Mr. Popo cosplay that I've ever seen. And I've been to some conventions. None of them were as bad as that. And that's not the only time he has worn blackface. He's done it not once, nor twice, but he has done it 3 times. Obviously, that didn't affect him at the end with his prime ministership, but it did land him a minority government, which he tried to expand in 2021, but ultimately failed in doing so. Bet y'all didn't know that Mr. Popo was the Prime Minister of Canada, because while Mr. Popo was Prime Minister of Canada, he was nothing but a complete boneheaded imbecile running the country. The Mr. Popo wannabe cosplay and the other times that he wore blackface are the least of my worries. He's an idiot. He's very controversial for a reason. His policies are controversial. His scandals are controversial. People also often make jokes about how he acts like Fidel Castro and even looks like Fidel Castro. So when I'm talking about Justin Trudeau's controversial and scandalous prime ministership, I'm essentially preaching to the choir. I really cannot think of anybody who thinks he's doing a great job and that he's a good PM, because he isn't. Now that he's resigning in office, I also forgot to mention one other thing. There's an election coming up and being held this year in Canada, I think sometime in the fall, if I remember correctly, but it could be held much earlier than that with the news of him resigning. Now, I don't really necessarily think that the Liberals are going to do so well in this election. If history is an indicator, the last time a ruling party's leader resigned, that same party that is in power ends up losing in somewhat of an embarrassing fashion. We saw that happen in the UK. When Boris Johnson had to resign, Liz Truss took over, and then she resigned. Once a new election came, the Labour Party just wiped the floor shortly thereafterwards. And Prime Minister Brian Mulroney in Canada resigned, and Kim Campbell, I believe, was the one who took over as Prime Minister of Canada. Her party also got humiliated shortly afterwards when an election took place. I do not realistically think anybody would want to support the Liberal Party anymore after what they've experienced under the Trudeau administration. The only reason why he kept winning these elections in 2019, in 2021, is because the Conservatives in Canada keep choosing weak leaders to run their party. Andrew Scheer was not a good candidate. Erin O'Toole was even worse. And there's also this other political party in Canada known as the New Democratic Party, which is sort of like this AOC, Ilhan Omar type of party, like a democratic socialist type. Their leader is named Jagmeet Singh, and he's the Sikh dude from British Columbia. All he really has is a bubbly personality, and that's pretty much it. They actually disagree with the Liberals a lot and are substantially to the left of the Liberals anyway on a lot of issues, hence why they failed to form a coalition with them while Trudeau had his minority government. And the PPC, it ran its course because, the Conservatives were selecting inept people to be their leader. Maxime Bernier, its leader, lost the leadership of the Conservatives to Andrew Scheer, hence why he created the PPC, or the People's Party of Canada, as it's called. They had decent showings in the last few elections, but Bernier ended up losing his seat in the last election, and the PPC doesn't have a single seat in the Canadian Parliament. Now, personally, I don't think having the PPC in there is going to be no longer necessary, because Conservatives actually have a competent leader who I think has a really good shot of being the next Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre. Now, I've already seen JJ McCullough interview Poilievre. I've seen a lot of his press conferences. I've seen a lot of his speeches and whatnot. I really do like this guy. He reminds me of Ron DeSantis just a little bit. At times, he even sounds like him too. He doesn't necessarily come off as, conservative, but he does have a lot of libertarian vibes and has a lot of libertarian tendencies. And I've seen he has become more popular in the country, and more people seem to like him. Because, he's not an idiot like Trudeau. He has stand against Trudeau multiple times. And ever since he was selected to be the leader of the Conservatives, people really did have high hopes for him. This might actually be the best shot for the Conservatives in Canada. And he's even universally liked by pretty much a lot of people that I've seen. Again, I watched his interview with JJ McCullough. He seems to be on board with him on a lot of issues. He might not be, Maxime Bernier type, if you know what I mean. But just by looking at him, just by analyzing some of his views, hearing him talk, hearing his platform, everything in between, this dude, I really would love to see him become Canada's Prime Minister. The last Conservative that they had, Stephen Harper, he was good while he lasted. He's not necessarily perfect. At least Stephen Harper was certainly better than his shithead successor. But, he's not necessarily a perfect Prime Minister. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of what he has done, but he has done what I would perceive as a pretty decent job, like a C plus B minus job for Canada as Prime Minister. But when I look at Poilievre, I think this is the right dude moving forward. Again, he might not be Maxime Bernier, but realistically speaking, I highly doubt we're ever going to see a third party like an NDP or a PPC take over and become Prime Minister of Canada. That's just not going to happen. Usually, it's either Liberals or Conservatives that ultimately become Prime Minister of Canada. But with Poilievre, I think you could be able to form a coalition with the PPC. I definitely would realistically be able to see Poilievre and Bernier work together on a lot of things. I'm not going to go and talk about the Canadian elections too much here. This is mainly about Trudeau and his resignation. We're going to wait and see what the Liberals choose to pick as their replacement leader for the Liberal Party. But one thing's for sure, good news, Canada, no more Justin Trudeau. So y'all can finally take a sigh of relief, I guess. And hopefully you'll get someone who is more competent, actually smart, and knows how to run a country pretty good, like Pierre Poilievre. But, at the end of the day, I'm an American. I'm just your little big brother down south. So to all my Canadians out there, what do you guys think about this situation? Do you think it's a good thing that you guys are getting a new PM? Do you think your country will miss Trudeau? What do you think is going to happen next? Who do you think will win the next election? Who do you want to be Prime Minister of Canada? Again, as always, at the end of every video, I love to pass the conversation right down to you. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, especially to all you Canadians out there who are obviously affected by this. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you're new around here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the little notification bell. Be sure to follow me on all my social medias. Links are in the description below. Share this video around with your friends, families, boyfriends, girlfriends, enemies, whomever. Definitely helps me out a lot, helps the video grow, and helps grow the channel if you were to share this video with whomever you know. I mean, 2025 is off to a pretty weird start, I should say. First day of the year, we get a truck attack. Well, 2 vehicular attacks. One in New Orleans, one in Las Vegas. California at this moment is on fire. And now Canada's Prime Minister just resigned. So I know I've been wanting to work on a 2025 update video, but there's just so much shit going on in the news. It's bizarre. And we got Trump's inauguration coming up, so maybe by the time that officially happens, the news kind of will dull down a bit, and I can finally work on some other content that isn't current event related. You may never know when that's gonna happen, so exactly the reason why you should subscribe to the channel. So that way, you won't miss out what I got in store for you guys when I upload. And when you turn on those noties, make sure they're on all and not personalized or partial, whatever they're called. Make sure you set those notifications to all, so that way you'll be notified when a video officially comes out. So anyways, guys, like, subscribe, ring notifications, and until then, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, talk soon, you're awesome.